Thank you. Thank you. I am so honored to be here today with you. And I'm so proud of the roots that faith and freedom have in Georgia. I'm so proud of that. I think we have a few Georgians here today as well. I'm not a politician. I'm an outsider that has no background in the political arena. My mom and dad were school teachers. I was raised working on our family farms. I worked my way through college. I became a Fortune 500 CEO. But my story is not unique. It's the American story. It's why you're here, why I'm here. And we're trying to protect that for our children and our children's children. I'm a working miracle. I should not have won this election by most prognosticators' estimates. But if you think about it, there's a little story that I like to tell that explains the mood of our state, and I think it speaks to the mood of the country right now. And explains how I, with no background, ran for the U.S. Senate in a crowded field and actually won. God has a sense of humor, and I can't wait to get up there and find out why. But I have to tell you, this story really speaks to the mood of our state. It was May before the primary. We had 7 people at that point in our primary. It was a crowded field. We're going into McDonough, Georgia, south of Atlanta. I have a new speech. I'm very nervous. And I'm, walking into a restaurant. We got about 100 people in the back. And I open the door, and I'm holding the door, about to go in, and a little lady, looked like she might be in her 80s, stopped, and I held the door for her. And she had a cane, and she looked up at me, and she said, "You're running for something, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "I just have one question for you. Have you ever been elected to anything? You ever done anything in Washington?" I said, "No, ma'am." She said, "Well, you got my vote." And she trundled on in. It didn't matter what I said. It didn't matter what I wore. It didn't matter how I looked. I mean, she had already made her mind up. And that mood is out there, ladies and gentlemen. We know something's wrong in Washington. It's broken. My role right now as a freshman senator is to call this crisis out, but then offer real-world common-sense solutions. In the last 100 years, we have had 3 Democratic supermajorities. Haven't had a Republican supermajority in the past 100 years. Those supermajorities have given us the New Deal, the Great Society, and yes, Obamacare and Dodd-Frank. I'm just a business guy, but any reasonable person can look at our current financial catastrophe and put at the feet of those 3 supermajorities most of the responsibility of this situation we have right now. And the irony of our time, and this speaks to what we have to do next year, the irony of our time is that these liberal policies of this progressive movement of the last 100 years have failed the very people that they claim to champion, the working people of America. Today we have fewer people working as a percentage than any time since Jimmy Carter was president. And by the way, I'm from Georgia, and the best thing Jimmy Carter gave us was Ronald Reagan. But we have fewer people working today. These policies have failed. The middle class incomes are down. Middle class net worths are down almost 20%. And worst of all, in the last 6 years, while this administration doubled down on these liberal, big government policies, 4 million women have fallen into poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a full-blown crisis. I have 3 components that I talk about when we talk about this crisis. The first is we have a constitutional crisis. This president has figured out how to run our government without Congress. He's used executive order and regulatory mandate to choke our economy and set the future for the next 50 years. If we're not careful, he's going to continue to do that. He has formed the 4th arm of government, the regulators, and they are absolutely choking the life out of our free enterprise system. We have got to get back to one thing that we know and love, and that's our beloved Constitution. In that Constitution, it has 4 very, very fundamental principles. And we forget these. And it's time we start telling the American people about them all over again. This is our mission, your mission, and my mission. Economic opportunity. Not guarantees, economic opportunity, fiscal responsibility, limited government, individual liberty. That's what I'm committed for, and I'm going to fight every day until we get back to those founding principles laid out in our Constitution. The second area that I want to talk about, we have a global security crisis. I've made 2 trips to the Middle East since I've been in office. And I will tell you that I've been on the front lines in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I can tell you the very best of America is in uniform over there fighting for freedom every day for you and me. But we have three areas that are really, really a problem right now. We have the rise of traditional rivalries, China and Russia. China has doubled their investment in their military in the last few years. Russia, we see what they're doing in Crimea, in the Ukraine, and we don't have a strategy. The second threat is of our own making. In 2011, this administration, against all military advice, prematurely pulled our troops, most of them, out of Iraq, created a vacuum into which grew ISIS. And now we face a tough decision of dealing with ISIS over there now or waiting and suffer the consequences here later. The third area, and maybe the most dangerous area, ladies and gentlemen, is that we're on the brink of having to deal with a nuclear Iran. I'm here before you today to tell you that we cannot have Iran become a nuclear weapon state, not now, not in 10 years, and not ever. The third area that I want to talk about in terms of crisis, but before I do that, I really have to come back to this. I mean, I want to belabor this a minute. You know, to have a strong, we just don't have a strategy in the Middle East. We don't have a foreign policy. To have a strong foreign policy, you have to have a strong defense. But to have a strong defense, you have to have a strong economy. And we're on the verge, ladies and gentlemen, of basically having the smallest army since World War II, the smallest Navy since World War I, and the smallest Air Force ever, when our military is facing more diverse threats around the world than any time in my lifetime. We have created, of our own intransigence, a world where our friends don't trust us and our enemies don't fear us. Part of the problem in the last 6 years, this administration has spent $21.5 trillion running our economy, running this government. But of that, we've borrowed $8 trillion. That means that every box of ammunition, every tank we bought, every airplane we sent, 40% of it was borrowed. It's so crazy, ladies and gentlemen, that it puts in jeopardy the very treaties that we have. We have over 50 treaties in the world right now. It says that those countries are attacked, we have to go to their defense. One of those is Taiwan. Our treaty with Taiwan says that if Taiwan is attacked by China, we have to go to Taiwan and defend them against China. But to do that, we have to go to China and borrow the money to go to Taiwan and defend Taiwan against China. Now that's absurd, but it's the absolute truth. Admiral Mullen, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that our own debt, our federal debt, is the greatest threat to our own national security. We have got to fix that, and that's the third area of crisis I want to talk about. This is what pulled me in here. I'm an outsider of this process, but I see this so clearly. We have a full-blown financial crisis, and it's of our own making. $18 trillion. If interest rates, how many of you remember double digits in interest rates? Remember that? Yeah, a few of us. I don't want to go back there. If interest rates were only at 5.5%, though, we would already be paying $1 trillion in interest. That's not workable. It's not manageable. That's twice what we spend on our military. It's twice what we spend on our discretionary budget. I'm on the budget committee, and I'm fighting every day to move us toward a balanced budget. But we've got to solve this problem on the debt. And the worst thing is that we have coming at us over $100 trillion in future unfunded liabilities. Social Security, Medicare, their trust funds go to zero within 15 to 18 years. The disability part of Social Security actually goes to zero in 2 years. Well, what are we going to do about that? Well, we have gridlock in Washington. That's one of the reasons I got involved. There are only a handful of business people in the Senate. I feel like I have a point of view about how to get the economy going again. Well, the first thing you have to recognize is that we don't have a strategy economically. The government is basically killing our economy. Overregulation, overtaxation. To grow the economy, we need to once and for all find a new way to fund our federal government, shut down the IRS, and move to a fair tax system that will absolutely create a level playing field. The second area that we need to do is push back on these regulators. Somebody said, well, David, what's the priority? Well, it doesn't matter. Pick an acronym in Washington and go after it. Really? EPA, CFPB, NLRB, you pick it, let's go get it. The third area. I can't make this up, y'all. I mean, it really, seriously. The third area, look at what God's done for us. I don't believe for a minute that God has brought us to this point to fail. And I've got evidence. Look at what He's done just in the last few years with our energy. Ladies and gentlemen, we're already energy independent. We just don't use it. We have every opportunity to be we have to have energy security and to have basically the cartel of the world for the next 100 years in North America. We need a solid energy policy to do that. I'm just a business guy. I'm trying to bring common sense solutions up here. But I'll tell you, the other thing is we just don't have the sense of urgency yet that we need to get at this crisis. I've never been more encouraged, never been more hopeful, but we have to balance this budget. We have to put the fair tax and do away with this over-bureaucratic collection of our money. And third, I put a bill in the first week I was here to develop that sense of urgency. I co-sponsored a bill that would bring term limits to the United States Senate. You know, I'm not at peace with where we are, if you can't tell. And I know you're not either. That's why you're here. But Paul told us in Philippians, be anxious for nothing, but through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a call to action for you and me right now. We're to pray, we're to supplicate, give thanks. But then the other message that comes out of Paul is we got to move. We got to act. Time is short. I believe that our call to action right now is to make sure that we get our conservative values put back into action, ladies and gentlemen. We have got to hold the Senate. We've got to hold the Senate in 16, and yes, we have to win the White House. We have to put our values back at work, and we have to stop this imperial presidency. But most of all, we cannot allow Hillary Rodham Clinton one more night in our White House. You know, Bonnie and I have grandchildren. We have 3 grandsons. The oldest is 4 years old. His name is Hudson. Hudson's figured out how to FaceTime me. And, you know, he loves to do that. And I will tell you this. The little guy's figured out that he can FaceTime me pretty much any time, day or night, and I'm going to take his call. And he called me 2 weeks ago, and they called me D2, and he said, D2, I love you. I said, oh, you know, it reaches in. They just reach in and get your heart, right? Well, but it reminded me. I think that was God. I think it was a reminder to me of why you're here and why I'm here. We do not want to be a member of the first generation that has to tell our children and our children's children that we're leaving them a world worse off than the one our parents left us. Ronald Reagan told us freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We don't pass it down to our children through the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and then passed on so they can do the same thing. Or one day, in our sunset years, we'll be telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in America when men were free. Not on my watch. Not on your watch. Together, we can take our country back. Together, we can put our principles back to work. And yes, together we can create a new beginning for our children and our children's children. God bless you for what you're doing. Thank you, and God bless America. Thank you.